Okay, my name is John H. Rodgers, and I'm here on behalf of the Sierra Club, the Portage Trail group today. And I took this picture of an Earth Day symbol in 1990, and what you're going to hear today still applies, I'm sorry to say. But maybe we have made a little bit of progress. That's a symbol of the Sierra Club, founded in 1892. And here's the title of this show: Holy Ground, Stewardship of Mother Earth. Let's start with a Bible verse. This is from the 3rd chapter of Exodus in the Old Testament. Moses has seen the burning bush and turns aside to look at it. And the Lord says, "Take off your shoes, for the ground on which you stand is holy." Now, following that lead, Elizabeth Barrett Browning wrote these words: "Earth's crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. But only he who sees takes off his shoes. The rest sit round it and pluck blackberries." In another show that I do, I say, we've got enough people who are willing to pluck blackberries. We want some more that recognize this as holy ground. It's easy to say that the holy ground of the Bible concerned only the area by the burning bush. Some find it difficult to consider any ground as holy. But if you hear a few names, you can get the general idea. Names like Grand Canyon, Brandywine Falls, Yellowstone. Yellowstone was changed, not destroyed, by the fires, and the Lincoln Memorial. But did you ever consider the miracles happening in your own backyard? For that too is holy ground. Indeed, the whole earth is holy. It's also easy to say that the earth was given to mankind for their own use without picking up the admonitions dealing with the faithful stewardship of the earth. And what has the human race done to this magnificent but very fragile earth, our holy ground? We have not treated it kindly. Now, we're talking about a relationship that gets more critical as the days go on. It is the ties that each of us has to our Mother Earth, and how we respect the fragile, holy ground that God has created. And notice that I didn't say created for us. I'm just not sure that it was created just for us. But let's let John Muir, the great naturalist and one of the founders of the Sierra Club, express his rebuttal to the "it's all for us" attitude in this passage. You'll see a variety of pictures as we go through here. This is a little white-footed mouse that used to inhabit part of our basement. He was last seen being released in Waterworks Park. Now, it never seems to occur to these far-seeking teachers that nature's object in making animals and plants might possibly be, first of all, the happiness of each one of them, not the creation of all for the happiness of one. Why should man value himself as more than a small part of the one great unit of creation? And what creature of all that the Lord has taken the pains to make is not essential to the completeness of that unit, the cosmos? The universe would be incomplete without man, but it would also be incomplete without the smallest transmicroscopic creature that dwells beyond our own conceitful eyes and knowledge. We enjoy the benefits of the Industrial Revolution, and we rejoice in the richness of our land. But when we look back, we find that we did not put a price tag on our benefits sufficiently high to cover the total costs. This is a nuclear plant on the coast of New Hampshire, and we refuse to do so today. We do not put into the cost of power generated by nuclear plants the cost of decommissioning those plants. We do not put into the cost of power generated by coal burning the cost of acid rain. Nor do we put very much emphasis on the fact that the fuels are not renewable. We say that we should develop more efficient transportation, but we cut out all funding for mass transit methods. We talk about wind power. These are California windmills. Solar power. These are in New Mexico. wave power, and other possibilities, but we do not adequately fund them. We look at things we can see and be disturbed by, such as litter, but many other agents of pollution not so easily detected, we ignore, or we try to ignore them. Now, with those remarks to warm you to the subject, at least I hope they do, this is my version of a list of problems facing mankind. Our waters are not close to being as pure as we have a right to expect. Our freshwater lakes, rivers, and streams take in too much pollution, such as runoff from agriculture. This runoff might be insecticides, fertilizers, waste from livestock, and that's what the picture is about, and the actual soil itself. Sewage treatment plants may not be adequate. The oceans, we have found, do not provide unlimited dilution of waste, especially toxic waste. Plastics do not dissolve, and thus their life stretches on for years. Heavy metals are life-threatening. Pure groundwater is basic to our well-being. Having said all of that, we've even been having signs like this, beach still closed, because of hospital waste washing up on some of the beaches. Now, having mentioned agriculture, I'm going to quote another favorite, Rachel Carson, as she wrote in Silent Spring. "It is not my contention that chemical insecticides must never be used. I do not contend that we have put, but I do contend that we have put poisonous and biologically potent chemicals indiscriminately into the hands of persons largely or wholly ignorant of their potential for harm. We have subjected enormous numbers of people to contact with these poisons without their consent and often without their knowledge. Our air carries a number of pollutants which harm people, trees, lakes, statues, and even the view. I hope that everyone in Ohio has heard about acid rain by now. And acid rain is a very large problem because we are one of the states that is now being told you must stop the severe pollution of the air, and we must stop it. But we have jobs that may be lost because of our high sulfur coal. However, if scrubbers are installed, then perhaps we pick up a few jobs, but it costs us much more money. These problems and the trade-offs that are involved do not appear to be very simple, but we must begin the long road back to clean air. Now, I've held on this picture of a factory because I want to tell you about this. This is Cleopatra's Needle. It's an obelisk that was found along with one that is now in London in the desert in Egypt. It had laid there for centuries, and on the eastern side of the one that's in Central Park, New York, the hieroglyphics still look like this. On the one on the western side, from whence come the prevailing winds, this is what it looks like today. That's acid in the air, be it acid rain or just the acid coming in the form of just minor droplets in the air. And part of it is from this stuff, coal. Now let's stay with the air for a moment and talk about the warming of the earth, the greenhouse effect. On my diagram here, here's the sun shining in. This is the layer we call the greenhouse layer. This is the Earth's surface. Now the sun shines in, and part of the energy comes back, hits the greenhouse layer, and comes down to Earth. And we need that to keep us warm. Part of it should, however, go back through that into outer space. When the sun shines in and it's like this, that's when you get the buildup of the, that we call the warming of the Earth. Carbon dioxide is one of the big culprits here, but surface ozone, also an agent of smog, is definitely involved. And that city that you're looking at with smog is Denver, Colorado. And much of both, that is, ozone and carbon dioxide, is tied to the use of fossil fuels. The gasoline in our cars, and that's the exhaust of my own vehicle, and the coal in our power plants. Directly connected to this very problem is the massive destruction of the world's rainforests. Trees are an excellent air pollution buffer. The rainforest destruction is probably at a scale even larger than the forest destruction when the westward movement in our own country was underway. And when we talk about forest destruction, our country is in a position of living in a glass house and throwing stones. We did much of our destruction long ago, but we're still at it, and we, the American people, are the losers, because many of the trees that are cut go to foreign nations. Many plants and animals are on the verge of extinction because of the loss of habitat. Wetlands are especially vulnerable because many people consider that such prime habitat is really only wasteland, good only for landfills. And the destruction can be as close as the bog at Kent or as far away as the Arctic Wildlife Refuge in Alaska. Now, this is not my picture. I've never seen the Arctic Refuge in Alaska, but this is the calving grounds for the great porcupine herd of caribou, the largest in the world, and the breeding and nesting grounds for millions of wildlife, especially birds. Each time that a species becomes extinct, the world loses a vital asset. And I put Indian paintbrush here because it's such a curious plant. It is not in danger of extinction. Perhaps we have already lost a medical breakthrough when a little-known plant becomes extinct. Thus, the rainforest problem falls under this heading as well. And if you are a bird watcher, the winter home of many of your friends is being destroyed, and therefore your birds will be gone. What might have been God's feeling when the last passenger pigeon died? Or when any plant or animal becomes extinct because of man? Did the Great Spirit weep as the buffalo fell to the white man's guns? Now, if we have something to discard, we set in motion consequences that reverberate into areas that we hardly consider. And if our discard is toxic, the problems are compounded. Let's say that the item is just an old can, not aluminum, and it takes up space in a landfill. That landfill might have been habitat for numerous plants and animals, but now it is useful only to rodents, coarse weeds, and perhaps seagulls. And if that discard happens to be a disposable diaper, because of the quantity, its impact is truly staggering. It's not as high as the 25 to 26% you've been hearing. It's closer to a little less than 1%. But even that for one item is still truly staggering. And gases out of landfills can be lethal and explosive. Leaching can take place, and it takes toxic material down to the groundwater. Also, let's remember that trees and other materials were used in that diaper, and now we're locking all of that up in a landfill. And if the item is toxic, a different set of rules apply, and the cost can be very large. It might be lead still in use in old water systems, or asbestos fibers still used for insulation. If it comes from a nuclear plant, all sorts of safety precautions are necessary, and the final storage method has not yet been determined. And remember that we have nuclear plants that have already finished their useful life, and this is the infamous 3 Mile Island plant by Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Remember also that safety has not been high on the priority list of handling nuclear fuels or toxic waste. Now, I did not mention the protective ozone layer high in the atmosphere of our little planets when I was talking about clean air, since it's a special case. Air conditioning agents, many spray cans, and perhaps other things we have not detected, are still bombarding this last line of defense. Although it was in the 1960s when DDT was banned in the United States, it is still being produced in the United States and sold in third world countries. DDT is still being put into the earth years after it was determined to be a toxic agent. It was even killing off this fella, our national bird, the bald eagle. Swelling population is at the base of many environmental problems. And you can see this is the year 2000 that we're going up on here, and look where it's taking us, 5 billion. And look how it swings on up beyond that, and only in the year 2020 we will have reached over 7 billion, heading towards 8 billion. But an increase in the population of developed countries has a much more drastic effect on the environment than does an increase in third world populations. This is the use of energy, which is one of the pollutants, of course, and a use of resources. Here's what 1 barrel is. And I took the country of Kenya because I have been there and I had the figures on it. A Kenya person would use a half barrel of oil or its equivalent, plus a few crop remains and a little bit of wood during a whole year. An American per person, about 45 barrels of oil equivalent. Doesn't seem fair. But as you think back, when a child is born in this country, you have to have a crib and a bassinet and this, that, and the other, and then a tricycle, and then a bicycle, and some other things, a lot of electronic equipment, and it goes on, and all of those are using resources. Other problems exist, and I'll use one of my own quotes to illustrate. The damming of a river is so final that by rights all people should have a say in such a decision. They should be heard before the first stake is driven, and their testimony should actually affect the decision. Hearings after the decision is made are, in most cases, useless. The rights of citizens has not been guaranteed by allowing comment while the waters climb the canyon walls. And the waters climb these canyon walls. This is the Cathedral in the Desert in Glen Canyon. The Glen Canyon Dam backed up water, and the entire picture is now underwater. This is from a Sierra Club book called Time in the River Flowing. And the words down below, remember these things lost, and under the vaulting roof of the cathedral, burn a candle to the memory. You and I will never see Cathedral in the Desert. Remember this old fella, Pogo, and the famous quote, "We have met the enemy, and he is us." Now that's my list of environmental problems that we face. Just as the web of life has many intricate relationships, so do these problems. If, for instance, someone says that the earth is not warming, and you agree with them, consider all of the other reasons for controlling the pollutants that are said to be causing the warming. Look at the whole picture. And how did we get into this situation? Well, quite often the one-word answer is greed. Now, I have two ways of illustrating greed. This is some of those slick catalogs that you get that are just full with page after page of things that you nor anybody else needs. I thought that illustrated greed, and then I thought this little old town of Las Vegas might be used to illustrate greed. They probably don't agree with me, but anyhow. But let's continue with two more quotes and an observation before we talk about what do we do. First, Rachel Carson, and that is a Japanese beetle on a rosebud. First, Rachel Carson, the control of nature is a phrase conceived in arrogance, born of the Neanderthal age of biology and philosophy, when it was supposed that nature exists for the convenience of man. The concepts and practices of applied entomology, for the most part, date from that stone age of science. It is our alarming misfortune that so primitive a science has armed itself with the most modern and terrible weapons, and that in turning them against the insects, it has also turned them against the earth. And out in California, this plane is spraying the bloom of the almonds in spring. Then more of John Muir and that familiar theme. You might even think that Mark Twain wrote this one. It's got some sarcastic comments in it, in other words. At the time I'm doing this, you'll be seeing some contrasting photos, like I'll show you the first two. Empty tar cans, contrasted with a farm in Amish country down in Holmes County, Ohio. John Muir, the world, we are told, was made especially for man, a presumption not supported by all the facts. A numerous class of men are painfully astonished whenever they find anything, living or dead, in all God's universe which they cannot eat or render in some way what they can call useful to themselves. They have precise dogmatic insight of the intentions of the Creator, and it is hardly possible to be guilty of irreverence in speaking of their God any more than of heathen idols. He is regarded as a civilized, law-abiding gentleman in favor either of a republican form of government or of a limited monarchy, believes in the literature and language of England, is a warm supporter of the English Constitution and Sunday schools and missionary societies, and is as purely a manufactured article as any puppet of a halfpenny theater. That's Canyon de Chelly in Arizona, the gorgeous Canyon de Chelly that you're looking at. With such views of the Creator, it is of course not surprising that erroneous views should be entertained of the creation. To such properly trimmed people, the sheep, for example, is an easy problem. Food and clothing for us. Eating grass and daisies, white by divine appointment, for this predestined purpose, on perceiving the demand for wool that would be occasioned by the eating of the apple in the Garden of Eden. I promised you that that would have some sarcasm in it, and you must admit that it did. And this is a Navajo family, part of one. You'll see the picture, the whole ones towards the end of this. They asked me to take their picture out in Arizona, and this pertains to them. Now, the observation mentioned before. Most American Indians regard land as sacred. Many do not even consider that they own land. Their sacred dances are performed on soil, and the performers are either barefooted or are wearing thin moccasins in order that contact can be made with Mother Earth. They respect their Mother Earth. But today, some of the Navajos are working for coal companies that are strip mining coal out of the Black Mesa in Arizona. One of the supervisors, a full-blooded Navajo, and he's the one on the right in this picture, told me that he had problems with himself for being part of the tearing up of his Mother Earth. The only thing that permits him to live with himself is the fact that his company is doing an excellent job of reclaiming the land. That is Window Rock behind these Native Americans, and they're at Window Rock in Arizona, and it is the political center of the Navajo Nation. Now, what can we do about all of these problems? First, let's try to understand them. I know that's not easy, but there are several organizations that will help you. They'll cost you money to join, and they'll bug you for other money for special campaigns, but they will inform you. And with your membership money, they'll lobby, educate, buy land of crucial importance, or haul a polluter into court and win the case. Now, I have a list for you, and I hope that you will consider it. The Sierra Club is high on my list, although I belong to all on the list. Others are the Nature Conservancy, Environmental Defense Fund, National Audubon Society, National Parks and Conservation, National Wildlife Federation, and World Wildlife Federation. Joining one of these organizations, however, is only one step. Perhaps it's the easiest. Vitally important, but relatively easy if you have the money. The next step is involvement of time and effort in addition to step one, doing some of the grubby work to make a difference. I have never found out exactly why I put these aspen in to illustrate this next statement. I just like the aspens, I suppose. Legislators and other leaders need to be informed of environmental positions on pending bills. But it's possible to do all of that and still not change ourselves into different people. And we must change to the point of having respect for the earth, and then many conflicts and choices become clear. Now hold that point for a moment. This is Abbott. I can't even pronounce Abbott's last name. He used to be head of the Hopi Nation, and Abbott was killed in an automobile accident. My wife and I got to spend an afternoon with him, along with some other people, and it was just fascinating the way he talked about what the Hopis thought and how the Hopis thought and where the Hopis came from and the whole thing about the Hopis and their Mother Earth. Now, on the conflicts and choices becoming clear, we take the Earth's part, and another parking lot, a clean-cut timber track, or unstable tanker is against the Earth. We must begin to stop and think about consequences for the actions we take. Just consider the treatment of your lawn for a moment. Do you use weed killers, insecticides, fertilizer? You may understand why you have to consider the first two items. They are poison and not necessarily only to the intended weed or insect. But you must also consider whether the fertilizer will run off and enter the storm sewer network, which means pollution for a stream. And you are not off the hook because someone else does it for you and puts a little flag out on your lawn. Take off your shoes, for the ground on which you stand is holy. This is Mount Moran out in Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Once again, let's hear Rachel Carson. Until very recently, the average person assumed that someone, usually in this building, the U.S. Capitol, was looking after these matters, and that some little understood but confidently relied upon safeguard stood like shields between his person and any harm. But now he has experienced a rather rude shattering of these beliefs. And you see signs like this, hazardous waste, and that PCB sign. And Rachel Carson once more. We stand now where two roads diverge. This is I-70 in Colorado. But unlike the road in Robert Frost's familiar poem, they are not equally fair. The road we have long been traveling is deceptively easy, a smooth superhighway on which we progress with great speed. But at its end lies disaster. Not necessarily at the end of I-70, but the other fork of the road, the one less traveled by, and this is the Oregon Trail, offers our last, our only chance to reach a destination that assures the preservation of our Earth. Now we're going to go somewhere in between there. I know we're not going to go back to the Oregon Trail, pretty rough on cars, but somewhere less than what we have. Several programs are being put in place. Recycling of aluminum, glass, certain plastics, and paper is encouraging, and I hope you are supporting these programs. Now I quote myself, but fragile environments do not simply last forever in a world inhabited by men and women and children. Effort on a continuing basis is needed. Views must be expressed to legislative bodies at all levels. Eternal vigilance is not an empty slogan, whether you're speaking of peace or of the environment. And I have deliberately held you at above timberline here on the Montana-Wyoming border. If I take my boot and kick that fragile environment, it takes almost 100 years for Mother Nature to carpet it again. And some of our environments are really fragile. We must take note of and develop a feeling for God's creatures and God's plant life, and in time, all of God's earth. When did you last make eye contact with a wild creature? Perhaps a chipmunk or a squirrel. When did you last look closely at a bud swelling and throwing off its protective scales to grow into spring? Have you seen your beautiful Brandywine Falls in the Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area? Have you seen the massive icicles in the Cuyahoga River Gorge in midwinter, the ones that I call chandeliers for the gods? All of these are God's creations. The environmental movement wants you to get out and see the beauty all around us, here at home and the more distant places. We want to enlist your help and support. We want you to see a few things in your own backyard and then go out to some of the other special places. CVNRA, that is Cuyahoga Valley National Recreation Area, the metro parks, some national parks, and I have Yellowstone on the screen. Only when you experience such rare beauty will you feel compelled to help protect it. And later you'll be wanting protection for animals, like this humpback whale in Alaska, and places and plants that you may never see. And I know that you'll be wanting a better deal than we currently have in the areas of water and air. We must continually inform legislative bodies at all levels that we want laws and rules that make it smart and profitable to stop pollution of all kinds. And thus I have the state capital of Ohio on the screen. And why should we